So, all right, so the microphones. So, I found these Mormons and these cops that were claiming, well, they were in hookup sites utilizing some modern microphone prototypes, and that they were acting as if they were some sort of agents or something. Okay. And so a lot of times those people, they have those. Okay. So I went and researched S&Ms. Okay. I remember any of them. It didn't really matter. The Nazis have S&Ms. The gangsters have S&Ms. The Mexicans have S&Ms. You know, they all have pretty much similar S&Ms. Those people have those microphones and stuff, but then I found cops that were calling themselves undercover agents, okay? And that then they were like basically like gathering blackmails on women and forcing them to be free prostitutes. And so I wondered, they said that the government gave them those microphones. And that then the Mormons, they just had them from, they claimed they do this, they were doing the same things as the cops, but they didn't claim to get those from the government, but they were claiming to be agents and shit. And then there was QAnon kind of people that were doing the same thing. So those people, they pretty much, the research that I did in like what is, it's not necessarily a government intellectualism, but it is in lots of ways. It's what the government somewhat hosts online and intellectualism, because they crowdsource problems and solutions from scientists, and that some of those scientists use those microphones, and that the like intelligence analysts and stuff, a lot of them in the federal government have those microphones also. So one of the things that I noticed is that in regular intelligence or whatever, those, well, in the government's one, they more or less utilize those microphones. It's like it would be like this iPad. Okay, it would be like the microphone would be something that would link directly to the iPad for them to do, like, you know, people walk around with like a cassette, like a, you know, they talk into something for notes and stuff like that. It was utilized for that type of stuff. That is what it was for. It ends up being a part of their own abilities to speak, okay? And so then it links into the discussion systems that they use in the government's hosted intellectualism stuff. Okay, so in the S&Ms, they attempt to do a similar intellectualism theory, I guess, and that they have a completely different like way of running that. It's like in the government, it's an open discussion format, and that anybody can, well, the people that are in it are already smart. The people that are in it already know about whatever the topic that's being discussed or analyzed or definition defined, all that stuff. They already know how to do what that stuff is. And that in the S&Ms, they have different rules, okay, on that type of idea. See, if like a man talks, then they aren't allowed to talk. If somebody's smarter than them, then they're not allowed to talk. And that is where you probably like in the government's version of that type of idea, if you're like some dumb cop, that wouldn't necessarily matter. You'd be able to talk if you had some sort of inclusion of information for whatever they're. I mean, when it comes to cybersecurity, it's like if if like some cop who has those microphones or something like that, if those people like knew something about weird dumb hackers and were able to explain stuff that they do in their free time or whatever that is, see, that wouldn't necessarily exclude you, and that would be added information and data that would build a full circle like explanation basically. And it's kind of like if you have a little more, if you have knowledge about how they do drug codes or whatever that shit is, you wouldn't necessarily be excluded. Their intellectualism is meant to bring in and not to exclude any usable data. Most of these cops, like I noticed, they're all trained to do a satanic S&M intellectualism method. So like when if like some scientist is talking, they won't have anything to add. You can ask them straight, direct questions, and they won't fucking say anything. They won't even open their mouth. So those are called placation hacking experts, to where whatever they're doing is meant for them to be a part of the discussion, but they end up not saying anything. And that, for whatever slew of reasons, they're actually just trying to be within that microphone ecosystem. More than likely, they're like allowing their S&M clubs to infiltrate into the speakers of the people doing the intellectualism. And then they're looking for like permanent copies of the profile that runs the microphone prototypes and the speaker prototypes and the iCamera prototypes. And then they end up selling that stuff. So that's really what most of them do, that not speaking kind of shit. That's what they're actually doing. And so when you take copies of those profiles, that's what they sell to other S&Ms, because they essentially all fit in a, whatever that profile is operates within their S&M database. And so then it also is like what's needed to run the microphones that they use in there. And that this is like where this queuing and shit, like if you say double, that's the kind of stuff that like, even saying that, they all of a sudden feel like they have to access your speakers and torture you and shit. And that they don't seem to understand. If you're involved in something that forces you to have to fucking torture somebody into suicide, then you're not doing something legal. And so that's just like what it is. These people, they are so psychotic that literally they it's like what happens with these hackers. It's like basically I did research on somewhat what would be these tech psychos that gather a huge group of hackers, and then basically I did research on those kind of people, and then I started to notice that essentially cops are psychologically, like a lot of the ones that I'm talking about, are like psychologically the exact fucking same. And then I found these like guys that do psychiatry and shit, and they're all exactly the fucking same. And that's just pretty much like where you can, in lots of ways, you can pinpoint those people, because you know you, for one, they'll be so used to doing stuff in an S&M that basically stuff that's like accepted in S&M as reality, like torturing somebody in speakers, or you know commenting in their speaker as they're making a video all the fucking time. Oh yeah, by the way, I went and outfitted myself with a pair of dark web speakers so I could monitor my own profile that you guys are accessing. So I'm doing that currently, and then I'll probably be not utilizing that stuff here soon. But this is where I've researched this shit in the past, and that currently what I'm doing right now is I'm analyzing at what the fuck you people do when you guys access those fucking speakers. Part of my main research. So this is where in the S&M world, if you directly say having a pair of hearing aids in, then you can tell that they're the psychopaths because then they'll start calling everybody a schizo. Okay? So those specific people, you just list those people as people to investigate the fuck out of. Okay? Take a facial recognition of their face and then attempt to figure out what dark web they're in. And then they'll have some raping and killing of children at a camp in it. Pretty high probability. So that's the kind of stuff that, you know, in the end, I'm not ever going to be afraid if I can prototype hearing aids that link in an AI way to a fucking profile. I'm not ever going to be afraid of that. But see, you can take those people. You can make all of their weird fucking games and methods and accepted forms of ideas and thought and shit out of their S&M. Once you start to pinpoint all that stuff, then you can build a completely high probability data mine without even violating their privacy based on their blatantness of wanting to like be on your computer. It's like they're so used to just hacking on people's shit all the time that right when they hack on your shit and they start saying somebody's like, he's that speaker, blah blah blah. I mean, it gets so fucking dumb that they sit in these S&Ms coming up with these like weird illusions about how they think they control people's lives. And most people in S&M like accept this dumb fucking idea, and that more than likely the sociopaths view everybody else as like lesser intellectuals than them. See, what they're going to start to have a problem with is that essentially what the government has emerging kind of is an intellectualism intelligence. And that's somewhat modeled. And so when the hackers, when they hack to it, it'll seem just like any other computer database that's S&M based. And that's where they'll be attempting to view everybody as dumb and retarded like all of them. And that's how you can really you really can exploit their own like confidence and intellectual like superiority Napoleon complex issues that they all suffer from. You can use that to damn near pinpoint what is basically leaders of psychotic hacker groups and shit like that. And see, it's their assumption that they would be able to make smart people believe. See, they're in satanic S&Ms. Satanic S&M intellectualism is not necessarily the smartest people ever. See, if they were smarter, they would probably be a Nazi S&M. That really has very intelligent people. But see, they're in satanic S&M, and that's the difference. Satanic S&M is like when it comes to genius or smart people, they usually, if they're not smart enough, they usually filter over to the satanic S&M. So all of those people, like if you're it's kind of like the neo-Nazi version of the 50 Gray and Gray or something. They have very intellectual people in that. They would never just hack onto a government database. They would know if Hanford was testing some sort of idea like that. They would know about that ahead of time. They would avoid pushing a terminal link onto a government database like that. But regular old satanic S&M clubbers aren't smart enough And then here's like another one. So since I'm making fun of Satan S&M, they live in this world where everybody's split up into two ways, and they think because I'm bald, and it's because I've gone through this with these dumbass fucking guys before. Okay, I can tell that it's the same group because I know how to analyze it. Their weird sound shit and their psyop shit that they do in the speakers. Okay. Oh yeah, they get put in a box. Oh yeah. So I'm an expert at analyzing this stuff. Okay, what this stuff ends up being is they end up bombarding people with forms of psychops and shit with it. I mean, I just hear it as a radio broadcast at a very low volume, but most people can't really navigate, all right? And so one of the reasons why I research it because in the end you can kind of understand like what group or whatever. So basically, these satanic S&M clubbers that would be putting the sound in my speaker right now, they basically are people that are like sadists. They're like Jew obsessed. They are basically raging pedophiles that could never get a hard on with a real woman. They think that they're smarter than everybody. They think that their weird idea about controlling somebody's brain or something. I mean, they literally have whole, like, they'll spend whole weeks and months on building a package of evidence on how they control someone's fucking brain. Right? So they're not very smart. So there's another aspect. Because anybody that would waste their time doing that is literally just busy being a sociopath and trying to impress other sociopaths. That's not a smart way to be at all. And that most of those people are just too fucking dumb to understand anything about anything. And that basically their whole world of intellectualism is going around looking for what other smart people do through pedo stealing. Oh, yeah, by the way, they're the pedo stealers. And so most of them wouldn't actually be smart at all. They just, if they're not able to talk, then they'll attempt to create an illusion of how they control. So this is what it is. They attempt to create an illusion about how they control someone's brain so that when the person talks intellectually, that they can claim to have been controlling their brain. And thus, whatever they say belongs to them. So, people who think at that level are not smart at all. And so, that pretty much, you could probably ask, what would be pretty, oh yeah, you go to these hookup sites, adult friend finders, and you go and find, like, the actual pretty women on it, like the modelly looking one. And then you go, who's the sadist guys that do all the pedo stealing? And then, pretty much, that will be like essentially the group currently. They One of the things about my profile is it minimizes the ability of people doing a whole lot of stuff in the speakers. They wouldn't be able to make it loud. But they like to do, oh yeah, and they're Proud Boys, but they kind of look like this a little bit. They do, yeah. They look like regular West Coast guys, and that, but they're Proud Boys, and that they like to pick at you. So there's a psychological aspect, like a rooster. You know how their sigil is a rooster. They like to pick at you, pick at you. So their psychotic sound torture method is to constantly be like, look at your face. Look at your man boob or something like that, okay? Yes. So that's their form of worthless, like, silencing method. See, the way that they do things is they find infatuated groups of little petaway wieners who sit around constantly doing it all the time. And then the big, I call them mopies. Then they like to come around once in a while, hoping that the psychological silencing breakdown from the constant low volume stuff, that is what they're looking for. And that then they like to come around later reminding you or something. And then I like to remind them that I can speak at length, in a very logical and rational way, what my research methods are. See, one of the things that I decided to do a long time ago, since all of you were a bunch of raging little fucking pedophiles and psychopaths, is I decided to not, since you guys had like this infatuation with getting people who were using hearing aids and dark webs and shit, be getting those people to be admitting that. And then for you all to be detaching from reality about what that would actually mean. And so I sat around for years, pretty much just not saying that. And then it drove all of you into a psychiatric overload. And that's where I really know that most of you are already in a psychiatric overload. All I did was push it out from the introvertedness to the extrovertedness.